Dad, here's your gift. If you win, remember half is mine. Mason's voice cut through the Father's Day dinner atmosphere as he tossed the lottery ticket across my dining table with that familiar smirk that used to be charming when he was 10 years old. Now, at 35, it just looked calculating. I'm Wesley Brooks, 58 years old, and I caught that crumpled paper with my weathered fingers, the same hands that had rebuilt transmissions for 35 years before retiring. The lottery ticket felt lighter than tissue paper against the rough calluses I'd earned fixing everything from leaky pipes to broken dreams in this blue-collar neighborhood. $2. That's what the ticket cost. I could see the numbers printed in small black type. 07, 14, 23, 35, 42, Powerball 18. Funny how you remember details like that when your whole world's about to change, you know? Very thoughtful, son, I managed, forcing a smile that probably looked as fake as it felt. The words tasted bitter in my mouth, like day-old coffee. Oh, but wait, Mason interrupted, his voice rising with that theatrical excitement he'd perfected in high school drama class. I haven't given Adrian his gift yet. He reached behind his chair and produced an elegant gift box, the kind that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Hell, the ribbon alone looked like it cost more than my dinner ingredients. The box gleamed under my simple dining room light, all gold foil and silk ribbon. Real silk, not the plastic stuff they sell at the dollar store. I could tell because Sophia, Mason's wife, kept touching it with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Adrian Sterling straightened in his chair, and I swear the man's posture could have been used as a ruler. His perfectly pressed shirt caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through my small windows, and every crease looked like it had been ironed by someone who charged by the hour. My son's father-in-law had that particular confidence that comes from never having to check your bank balance before buying groceries. These, Mason announced, lifting cruise tickets from their silk-lined box like he was unveiling the crown jewels, cost $11,000. Adrian deserves the best for everything he's done for our family. The weight of my lottery ticket suddenly felt microscopic. I watched Adrian examine those tickets with the satisfaction of a man who'd never questioned whether he deserved expensive things. His manicured fingers traced the gold embossing, and I found myself looking down at my own hands, clean but scarred, with motor oil permanently stained under my nails despite years of scrubbing. Now, this is what I call a proper gift, Mason, Adrian said, his voice carrying that particular tone rich people use when they approve of something. You know the sound, like they're bestowing a blessing. His eyes met mine across my modest table. Your father taught you well. That phrase hung in the air like smoke from a backfiring engine. Everyone else at the table shifted, uncomfortably, suddenly finding their plates absolutely fascinating. My sister Grace stopped mid-chew, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Sophia studied my family photos on the wall like she was memorizing them for an art history exam. Even my grandson Caleb looked up from his phone, confusion written all over his 16-year-old face. You have to understand, this wasn't just any dinner table. This was the same table where I'd helped Mason with his homework every night for 12 years after his mother died. The same table where we'd eaten countless bowls of cereal for dinner because I'd worked a double shift and was too tired to cook. The same table where I'd counted out college tuition money, sorting bills into careful piles, always making sure his education came first. Dad always said, "Actions speak louder than words," Mason replied, his laugh bright and sharp like broken glass. He glanced at Adrian and something passed between them, a look that made my chest tighten like someone was slowly turning a wrench around my ribs. Some people show love through grand gestures. Others... He gestured vaguely at my lottery ticket, like he was pointing at roadkill. I held that paper steady, though my hands wanted to shake. The same hands that had changed his diapers, taught him to throw a baseball, signed every permission slip and report card. I appreciate the thought, Mason. Really. Oh, it's just a little joke, he said, waving dismissively like he was shooing away a fly. But seriously, if you hit the jackpot, I expect my cut. I paid for it after all. Adrian chuckled, the sound low and satisfied, like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. Perhaps next year Wesley will surprise us all with something more substantial. The afternoon sunlight streaming through my windows highlighted every uncomfortable expression around my table. Grace's fork was still frozen halfway to her mouth, Sophia had moved on from studying my family photos to examining my simple furniture like she was appraising it for a yard sale. The silence stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. "These cruise tickets," Adrian continued, fanning them out like playing cards in a poker game he'd already won, "represent 2 weeks in the Mediterranean. First-class accommodations, private balcony, all meals included. The kind of experience that creates lasting memories." I nodded, my throat feeling like I'd swallowed sandpaper. "Sounds wonderful." "It is wonderful," Mason agreed, his voice taking on that reverent tone people use when they talk about money they don't have. "Adrian has always been there for us financially. He helped us buy our house, paid for Caleb's private school, even covers our country club membership. He's earned something special." The lottery ticket felt like it might disintegrate in my grip. I remembered the double shifts I'd worked at Henderson's garage, the overtime hours fixing transmissions and rebuilding engines, all to pay for Mason's college education. The nights I'd fallen, asleep in my recliner, still in my work clothes, too exhausted to make it to bed after working 16-hour days just to afford his textbooks and meal plans. I remember one particular night when he was 19, home from his sophomore year at Ohio State. I'd been under the hood of a '98 Buick until nearly midnight, trying to diagnose a mysterious engine knock. My back was screaming, my knees were shot, and my hands were so stiff I could barely grip the wrench. But I knew that car repair meant another $300 toward his tuition, so I kept working. When I finally dragged myself inside, Mason was on the couch playing video games, complaining that his monthly allowance was too small. I never told him about those nights, never made him feel guilty about the sacrifices. That's what fathers do, right? We carry the weight so our kids can fly. "Well," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the clinking of silverware, "I hope you both enjoy the cruise." "We will," Adrian said, slipping the tickets back into their box with the ceremonial care of a priest handling communion wafers. "This is how families should treat each other, with generosity and respect." The conversation moved on to safer topics after that. Caleb's baseball season, Sophia's yoga instructor certification, Adrian's latest investment portfolio performance. Normal family stuff, except nothing felt normal anymore. I kept staring at that tiny piece of paper in my hands, turning it over and over between my fingers. $2. The same amount I used to give Mason for ice cream when he was 7, back when that small gesture could light up his entire face like a Christmas tree, back when I was his hero instead of his disappointment. After dinner, they left as quickly as they'd arrived. Car doors slammed outside, expensive car doors with that solid, heavy sound that cheap cars never make. Engines purred to life, voices faded into the evening air, and I was left sitting at my table, still holding that lottery ticket, watching the last of the sunlight disappear from my dining room. The house settled into the familiar quiet of my solitary life. You know that particular silence that comes after company leaves? It's different from regular quiet. It has weight to it, like the walls are holding their breath. I looked around at the family photos covering my walls. Mason's high school graduation, his wedding day, Caleb's first baseball game. Every picture told a story of pride, of love, of a father who'd given everything he had. The modest furniture I'd bought piece by piece over the years suddenly looked shabby in my mind, viewed through eyes that had just seen how the other half lived. The lottery ticket lay beside my empty coffee cup the next morning, forgotten in the light filtering through my kitchen window. I had my usual routine, coffee first, then the newspaper, then checking my bank statement online, a ritual I'd maintained for 40 years, first as a young father counting every penny, now as a careful retiree, protecting what little I had. My laptop hummed to life on my kitchen table, the same table where I'd done my taxes every year, where I'd written checks for Mason's college expenses, where I'd carefully budgeted every dollar to make sure his future was secure. I logged into my First National Bank account expecting to see the usual modest numbers. My checking account, my small savings account, the emergency fund I'd built up over decades of careful living. Nothing fancy, but enough to give me peace of mind. My finger traced down the list of transactions on the screen. Utility bills, $127 for electric, $43 for gas. Kroger grocery store, $67 for Father's Day dinner ingredients. I'd splurged a little on that meal, buying actual steaks instead of hamburger. My monthly prescription, $34 with Medicare. Everything accounted for, everything expected, until I reached a line that made my coffee grow cold in my mouth. Premium travel services, $11,337. I blinked hard, certain I'd misread. The amount stared back at me, unchanged and undeniable. My hands started trembling as I cross-referenced the date with my calendar. 1 week ago, Thursday. I'd been nowhere near a travel agency that day. Hell, I hadn't been on a vacation in 6 years, not since Martha died. The realization hit me like a wrench to the gut. Mason still had authorized access to my account. I'd set it up years ago when his mother was dying, in case of medical emergencies, in case I couldn't make decisions for myself. It was supposed to be for emergencies only. I'd completely forgotten about it. My phone felt heavy in my shaking hands as I dialed his number. Each ring echoed in my quiet kitchen, mixing with the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Outside, Mrs. Patterson was watering her tomatoes, normal as any other Tuesday morning. Inside, my world was falling apart. "Hello, Dad." His voice carried that particular tone of bored politeness he used when I interrupted his important life. Like I was a telemarketer he was too polite to hang up on. Mason. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked anyway. "I'm looking at my bank statement. There's a charge for over $11,000 from premium travel services." Silence. Then a laugh, light and dismissive, like I'd just told him his shoes were untied. "Oh, that. I bought Adrian his cruise. He deserves something nice for once." The casual way he said it hit me harder than if he'd screamed. No apology, no explanation, just a simple statement of fact. Like taking someone else's money was the most natural thing in the world. "You took $11,000 from my account without asking." The words came out flat, emotionless. I couldn't seem to access my anger yet. It was still hiding behind shock. "I didn't take anything, Dad." His tone shifted, becoming slightly defensive, like a teenager caught sneaking out past curfew. "I used family money for a family gift. You wouldn't have spent it anyway. It's just sitting there collecting dust. Family money," the phrase echoed in my head like a slap. That money represented 40 years of careful saving, of choosing generic groceries over name brands, of driving used cars until they literally couldn't run anymore. Every dollar in that account had a story. Overtime shifts worked when my back was killing me, vacation days sold back to the company instead of taking time off, Christmas presents. I'd gone without so Mason could have what he wanted. "Mason, that's theft." My voice broke on the word like a rusty hinge. "You stole from me. It's not stealing when it's family money," he snapped. And now I could hear the real Mason coming through, the entitled man-child who'd learned that charm and manipulation could get him anything he wanted. Adrian has always been there for us financially. He helped us when we needed it. This is just returning the favor. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. "I'm your father, Mason. I raised you. I worked double shifts to pay for your college education. Doesn't that count for anything? And Adrian helped us both move beyond all that," he interrupted, his voice getting sharper with each word. "He's shown us what real success looks like, what it means to be generous, to live well, to give meaningful gifts instead of—" He paused, and I could hear his dismissive sigh even through the phone. "Instead of lottery tickets." The cruelty in his voice left me speechless. This was my son, the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read him bedtime stories. The teenager who'd cried on my shoulder when his mother died, promising we'd always have each other. The young man who'd once called me his hero and meant it. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here," I whispered, though I felt like I was disappearing, dissolving like sugar in rain. "Look, I know you're upset, but think about it rationally. Adrian earned this. He's successful. He's contributed to our family's well-being in ways you never could. He deserves recognition for everything he's done." "And what about everything I've done?" Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it, colder than the Ohio winter mornings when I'd scraped ice off my windshield before heading to work. "You did what fathers are supposed to do, Dad." Adrian went above and beyond. The line went dead with a sharp click that echoed in my empty kitchen like a gunshot. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the dial tone humming its electronic funeral song. My hands shook as I set it down, the same hands that had held him as a baby, taught him to ride a bike, applauded at his high school graduation when he gave that speech about how his father was his biggest inspiration. I walked to my bedroom like a man in a daze and grabbed the lottery ticket from where I'd left it on the nightstand. The $2 joke he'd thrown at me like scraps to a dog. Even this pathetic gesture had been bought with my own stolen money. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh, except laughing felt impossible right now. Instead, I crumpled the ticket in my fist and marched to the kitchen trash can, my bare feet slapping against the linoleum floor. The paper made a satisfying thud as it hit the bottom, joining the coffee grounds and empty soup cans that represented my simple, apparently worthless life. The house felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I needed air, needed to move, needed to be anywhere but in this place where my son's betrayal echoed off every surface like a broken record. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door and headed outside. The morning air was crisp and clean, filled with the sounds of normal suburban life. Lawnmowers starting up for the weekly ritual, children playing in yards where their biggest worry was whether they could stay outside until dark, neighbors calling greetings across fence lines like everything was right with the world. Mrs. Patterson waved from her garden, her arthritic hands gentle with her tomato plants. At 73, she'd been widowed for 8 years, but still maintained the most beautiful garden on the block. "Beautiful morning, Wesley." "Yes, it is," I replied automatically, though the day felt anything but beautiful. Everything looked the same as always, but I felt like an alien visitor studying human behavior from a great distance. I walked past the Henderson house, where Liam was teaching his grandson to throw a baseball. The boy's laughter carried on the breeze, pure and uncomplicated. I remembered teaching Mason the same way in this very neighborhood, his small hands gripping the ball with determination, his face bright with joy when he finally made a perfect throw. When had that changed? When had my love become something to be ashamed of instead of celebrated? My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest like a wounded bird. Maybe Mason had reconsidered. Maybe he'd realized what he'd done to the man who'd given him everything. "Dad, I talked to Adrian about the money situation. He thinks you're overreacting. It's not like you needed it for anything important. We'll pay you back when we can, maybe for Christmas. K." I stopped walking right there in the middle of the sidewalk and read the message again, then a third time, "when we can," as if $11,000 was pocket change. As if my financial security was something they could negotiate, as if I should be grateful for the possibility of eventual repayment, like a bank giving a deadbeat borrower one more chance. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a dismissive promise that someday, if they felt like it, they might consider giving me back my own money. 3 days passed. 3 quiet days of morning coffee, simple meals, and the kind of peace that comes from cutting toxic people out of your life, even when those people share your blood. I'd called the bank on day 2 and revoked Mason's access to my account. Rebecca, the customer service representative, walked me through the process with professional sympathy, and for the first time in years, I felt the solid certainty of protecting myself. New security measures, new passwords, new boundaries. It felt like installing deadbolts on doors that had been wide open for too long. On the evening of day 3, I was stirring scrambled eggs in my cast-iron skillet when the TV news shattered the silence. I usually kept it on for background noise, the familiar voices of local anchors helping to fill the empty spaces in my quiet house. "Good evening, Ohio. Welcome to tonight's Powerball drawing where we have a rollover jackpot of $120 million. I almost changed the channel. The last thing I needed was to think about lottery tickets and the joke gift that had started this whole nightmare. But something about the announcer's cheerful voice made me pause. Maybe it was the absurdity of it all. Here I was being called a greedy miser for protecting my modest savings while someone was about to win more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Tonight's winning numbers are... The announcer's voice took on that ceremonial tone reserved for life-changing moments. 07, 14, 23, 35, 42, and the Powerball is 18. My hand froze on the spatula. Those numbers sounded familiar, disturbingly familiar. I grabbed a pen from the counter and scribbled them on the back of an envelope as the announcer repeated them with practiced enthusiasm. 07 to 14, 23, 35, 42, Powerball 18. My heart began racing before my mind fully caught up. I knew those numbers. I'd stared at them long enough to memorize them in a moment of anger and bitter irony 3 days ago. The lottery ticket. The crumpled piece of paper I'd thrown away in disgust. I stumbled to the kitchen trash can, my legs suddenly unsteady beneath me. The can sat there innocently by the counter, filled with 3 days' worth of solitary living. Coffee grounds, empty soup cans, banana peels from my modest breakfast routine. I plunged my hands into the mess, digging through the debris like a man possessed, searching for a small piece of paper that might change everything. My fingers found it near the bottom, stuck to the side of a yogurt container and stained with coffee grounds. The lottery ticket, wrinkled beyond recognition but still readable. I carried it to the kitchen sink with trembling hands and carefully rinsed off the worst of the mess, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. 07, 14, 23, 35, 42, Powerball 18. Perfect. Every single number matched. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, staring at the damaged ticket in complete disbelief. The $2 joke that Mason had thrown at me like scraps to a dog. The gift he'd bought with my own stolen money and then claimed half ownership of. The piece of garbage I'd discarded in a fit of righteous anger. It was worth $120 million. The lottery verification process took 10 business days, just like they said it would. During that time, I barely slept, barely ate, barely believed it was real. I kept the ticket in a plastic sleeve, checking it every few hours to make sure I hadn't imagined the whole thing. By the time I stood at the podium for the official check presentation ceremony, news of my win had somehow leaked. The Ohio Lottery Commission's Columbus headquarters buzzed with activity, television crews adjusting lighting equipment, photographers testing angles, reporters with their notebooks and eager expressions. "Mr. Brooks," Janet Victoria from the Lottery Commission said with a professional smile, "this is quite a story. Are you ready to become a millionaire?" The actual ceremony was surprisingly formal. A backdrop featuring the Ohio Lottery logo, an oversized check that took 2 people to hold, and enough camera flashes to light up a stadium. When Janet announced me as the winner of the $120 million Powerball jackpot, the applause felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else. "This is certainly unexpected," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying better than I'd hoped. "I plan to use this blessing responsibly, to help others who deserve it, and to live with the kind of integrity that makes a person worthy of good fortune." The questions from reporters came fast and sharp. How did it feel to win? What were my plans? Would I quit working? I answered as honestly as I could, focusing on gratitude and responsibility rather than the family drama that had brought me here. Then, through the crowd of media personnel, I saw them. Mason and Sophia pushed through the gathering, his face flushed with determination and desperation. He wore his best suit, the charcoal gray one I'd helped him pick out for job interviews years ago. "Stop!" he called out, his voice cutting through the professional atmosphere like a fire alarm. "That's my ticket. We had an agreement." Security personnel moved immediately, but Mason's voice carried over their intervention. "Everyone here needs to know that ticket was mine. He's stealing from his own son." The cameras swiveled toward the commotion like sharks sensing blood in the water. This was the kind of drama that television news lived for. Family conflict over enormous sums of money. "Sir, you need to step back," a security guard said firmly, but politely. I looked directly at Mason, feeling calmer than I had in months. "Mason, please don't do this here." But he was beyond reason, gesticulating wildly as Sophia tried to pull him back. "I bought that ticket. I said half was mine. Everyone at that dinner heard me. It's legally binding." A reporter thrust a microphone toward me. "Mr. Brooks, can you comment on this family dispute?" "The ticket was a Father's Day gift from my son," I said clearly. Mr. Adrian Sterling, who was present at the dinner, has already provided a sworn statement confirming the circumstances of that gift. There was no agreement, no conditions, no strings attached. It was simply a gift. What I didn't mention was that Adrian had surprised everyone by coming forward as a witness. Apparently, the man still had some integrity buried under all that wealth, and he couldn't watch his family destroy a good man's reputation with lies. "What do you plan to do with the money?" another reporter asked. I thought about Mason screaming in the background, about the months of manipulation and betrayal, about the years I'd spent enabling his worst impulses out of misguided parental love. "I plan to start the business I've always dreamed of," I said. "I want to help other working people achieve their dreams, and I intend to live with dignity." 2 weeks later, Mason showed up at my door one last time. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes wrinkled. "Dad, please, We're about to lose our house. I just need $1.5 million. You'd still have over $100 million left. No, Mason, I said quietly. You need to learn to solve your own problems. 3 months later, I stood in my new auto restoration shop in Phoenix, watching the Arizona sunset paint the mountains gold. Desert Ridge Auto Restoration was everything I'd dreamed of, and the Blue Collar Scholarship Fund had already helped 15 young people enter trade programs. At 58, I'd finally learned that the most important lottery you can win is the courage to live with dignity, even when it costs you everything else you thought mattered.